You've probably heard someone say that crocodiles haven't changed in millions of years, that they're living fossils, holdovers from the age of dinosaurs, basically the same animal now that they were back then. It's one of those facts that gets repeated so often that nobody questions it anymore. But it's wrong. The crocodile sitting in a zoo enclosure today is about as representative of its family's history as a chihuahua is of the entire canine lineage. It's one tiny branch on a tree that once had hundreds. This is what prehistoric crocodiles actually looked like. And almost none of them would remind you of anything alive today. The group we're talking about is called Crocodylomorpha, and it's been around for over 230 million years. That's older than the oldest dinosaurs, older than the first mammals. Crocodylomorphs were one of two archosaur lineages that survived the catastrophic mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, roughly 252 million years ago, and went on to become one of the most diverse and successful groups of vertebrates in Earth's history. The other surviving archosaur lineage, dinosaurs. So from the very beginning, crocodile relatives and dinosaur relatives were sharing the planet, competing for space and evolving side by side. And here's the part that catches everyone off guard. For the vast majority of their history, crocodylomorphs weren't semi-aquatic ambush predators lying in rivers, waiting for something to walk past. That particular strategy, the one that defines every living crocodilian today, is actually the exception. It's the body plan that happened to survive. The family as a whole produced ocean-going swimmers with flippers and dolphin skin, galloping land predators with tusks, bipedal hunters that walked on two legs with blade-like teeth, tiny herbivores that ate plants, and massive filter feeders with mouths wider than their bodies. The variety is so extreme that if you lined up 10 random prehistoric crocodylomorphs, you might not recognize a single one as being related to a crocodile. So let's go through them, starting with the one that walked upright and terrorized North America before the dinosaurs even got started. 231 million years ago, during the late Triassic, the supercontinent Pangaea was still in one piece. North America, Europe, Africa, South America, and every other landmass on the planet were welded together into a single giant continent, surrounded by a single global ocean. The region that would eventually become North Carolina sat on the equator, blanketed in warm, humid tropical forest, with temperatures year-round that would have made a modern summer in the Amazon feel mild by comparison. The first dinosaurs had appeared in the southern hemisphere, but they were small, mostly minor players in ecosystems dominated by a wild assortment of other reptiles. Armored plant eaters called etosaurs shuffled through the undergrowth. Large, crocodile-like predators called phytosaurs lurked in the waterways, and stalking through the forest on two legs with a long skull full of blade-like teeth was an animal called Carnifex carolinensis, the Carolina butcher. Carnifex was a crocodylomorph, a genuine member of the same broad lineage that includes every crocodile and alligator alive today, but it looked nothing like them. It was roughly 3 meters long from nose to tail, stood about 1.5 meters tall at the hip, and walked upright on its hind legs, with its forelimbs reduced in size, almost like a small theropod dinosaur. Its skull was long, narrow, and ornamented with ridges and pitting on the bone surface, and its teeth were compressed and blade-like, designed for slicing flesh rather than crushing bone or gripping slippery fish. The fossils were found in the Pecan Formation in Chatham County, North Carolina, and included parts of the skull, spine, and upper forelimb of a single individual. The research team, led by paleontologist Lindsay Zano from North Carolina State University, used three-dimensional scanning to digitally reconstruct the animal's skull from the fragmentary pieces, and the result was striking. This wasn't some bottom-feeding swamp lurker. This was a lean, agile, land-dwelling predator built for chasing things down. When a reporter asked Zano what a person would experience if they were transported back to the Triassic and encountered Carnifex face-to-face, she didn't hesitate. Abject terror. Her colleague Vince Schneider from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences offered slightly more practical advice. Climb up the nearest tree. Carnifex wasn't just a predator. It was likely one of the top predators in its entire ecosystem. And that fact alone rewrites a big chunk of what most dinosaur documentaries want you to believe. Before dinosaurs grew large enough to dominate the apex predator role in the northern hemisphere, large-bodied crocodylomorphs like Carnifex were already filling it. They were doing the job that tyrannosaurs and allosaurs would later take over. The first truly large land predators in North America weren't dinosaurs. They were crocodile relatives. This detail completely upends the popular narrative about dinosaurs being the dominant land predators from day one. They weren't. The crocodile relatives got there first, and they held that position for millions of years. The age of dinosaurs didn't start because dinosaurs were inherently better at being predators. It started because the end Triassic mass extinction, roughly 201 million years ago, wiped out the large crocodylomorphs and many other competing predator groups in what scientists call a predator pile-up that had been building through the late Triassic. Lindsay Zano described it as having too many top performers on the proverbial stage. The extinction cleared that stage, and the dinosaurs, which had been small and minor up to that point, walked into the spotlight. If that extinction hadn't happened, dinosaurs might never have become dominant at all. The history of life on land would be a crocodilomorph story, not a dinosaur story. Now, a crocodile relative that walks on two legs is already strange enough, but the next one abandons land entirely and moves into the open ocean. Metriorhynchus lived during the late Jurassic, roughly 155 to 145 million years ago, in the shallow seas that covered what is now Western Europe. It was a crocodylomorph. It shared a common ancestor with every crocodile and alligator alive today. And it looked like a dolphin. However, Metriorhynchus was about 3 meters long, with a streamlined, torpedo-shaped body and smooth skin that completely lacked the rough, armored scales and bony osteoderms of modern crocodilians. Its limbs had evolved into paddle-like flippers that were useless for walking on land, but perfect for steering through open water. Its tail had developed a vertical tail fluke, a fin structure similar to what you'd see on a shark or an ichthyosaur, providing the primary thrust for swimming, and it had specialized salt glands near its eyes that could excrete excess salt from seawater, an adaptation shared with modern sea turtles and marine iguanas, which meant it could drink ocean water and survive indefinitely at sea without ever returning to fresh water. This wasn't a crocodile that sometimes went in the water. This was a crocodile that couldn't function on land at all. Its flippers couldn't support its weight for walking. Its body was shaped for speed in water, not stability on solid ground. Scientists believe Metriorhynchus spent its entire life in the ocean, hunting fish and cephalopods in the same waters where ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs swam. It belonged to a broader group called Thalattosuchia, the sea crocodiles, and the diversity within this group was staggering. Some Thalattosuchians developed elongated, gharial-like snouts for snatching fish. Others became deep-diving predators. A few grew to over 4 meters long and may have fed on other marine reptiles. If you've been swimming in the Jurassic seas off the coast of what's now England or France, and Metriorhynchus glided past you with its smooth skin and flippered limbs, the last thing you'd have guessed is that you were looking at a crocodile relative. It had more in common with a modern dolphin than with anything lying on a riverbank, and the fact that this animal evolved from the same ancestors as the flat-headed, scaly, river-dwelling ambush predators we know today tells you just how elastic the crocodilomorph body plan really was. Give it 100 million years and a new environment, and this lineage could turn itself into almost anything. Some Thalattosuchians took the marine adaptation even further than Metriorhynchus. Members of the family Metriorhynchidae lost their bony armor entirely, developed fully hydrofoil-shaped flippers, and evolved deep, laterally compressed tails that could drive them through the water at speeds that would have rivaled many modern fish. They were so adapted to marine life that scientists are still debating whether they could haul themselves onto beaches to lay eggs, like modern sea turtles, or whether they gave live birth in the water like ichthyosaurs. Now, let's go to the Cretaceous and meet something that's basically a horror movie on legs. About 100 million years ago, in what is now the Sahara Desert of Niger, a crocodylomorph called Kaprosuchus was doing something that no modern crocodile does. It was running, on land, fast. Kaprosuchus, nicknamed boarcroc by paleontologist Paul Sereno, who discovered it in 2009 during an expedition to the remote fossil beds of Niger funded by the National Geographic Society, was about 6 meters long and weighed roughly a ton. The expedition itself was wild for the sheer number of new crocodylomorph species it produced. Sereno's team pulled 5 distinct species out of the same Cretaceous-aged rock formations, each one weirder than the last, and Kaprosuchus was the star of the show. Sereno found only the skull, but what a skull it was! It was elongated and heavily built, with an armoured snout reinforced with thick bone at the tip, suggesting the animal may have used its head as a battering ram, charging prey at speed and slamming into it before delivering the killing bite. And those killing bites would have been horrific. Kaprosuchus had 3 sets of massive interlocking tusks, 2 pairs in the upper jaw and 1 in the lower, and all of them jutted out even when the mouth was closed, giving the animal a permanent snarl. These weren't the conical, peg-like teeth of a modern crocodile. They were flattened, dagger-shaped blades with compressed crowns, designed for ripping flesh from bone. Its eyes were positioned more toward the front of the skull than the top, giving it binocular stereoscopic vision for judging distances on land. Another adaptation that screams land predator rather than water ambusher. Sereno described it as having an armoured snout for ramming and 3 sets of dagger-shaped fangs for slicing. He also found evidence that Kaprosuchus and its relatives likely had upright, agile legs positioned directly under the body, giving them a mammal-like gait rather than the sprawling waddle of modern crocodiles. They could gallop, bounding across open ground the way a large dog or a horse does. This was a land predator that chased things down, tackled them, and tore them apart with tusks. At the same time, Sereno's team also discovered other bizarre crocodylomorphs at the same sites, including dog croc, a small species with a broad nose and forward-facing eyes that likely ate grubs and plants, and pancake croc, a flat-headed species with a broad snout designed for sitting on the river bottom and ambushing fish. Each one was adapted to a completely different ecological niche, all living alongside dinosaurs in the same Cretaceous ecosystem. 5 different species of crocodylomorph, each doing something completely different, all found within the same fossil beds. The diversity was almost absurd. Now, if Kaprosuchus was the sprinter of the family, the next ones were the heavyweights, and their size is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. Sarcosuchus imperator, commonly known as supercroc, lived approximately 112 million years ago in what is now the Tenere Desert of central Niger. During the Cretaceous, this region was nothing like the barren sand sea it is today. It was a vast network of rivers, lakes, and floodplains, flanked by lush vegetation, and the waterways were home to some of the largest predators the continent had ever produced. Spinosaurus was there, the largest theropod dinosaur known to science. Carcharodontosaurus was there, a predator with teeth the size of bananas, and sitting in the rivers, occasionally hunting both of them when they came too close to the water's edge, was Sarcosuchus. Sarcosuchus could reach lengths of up to 12 meters, nearly 40 feet from snout to tail tip. It weighed roughly 8 metric tons, about the same as a fully loaded cement mixer. Its skull alone was nearly 2 meters long, and its jaws contained over 100 thick conical teeth, designed not for slicing, but for clamping, grabbing prey in a grip that nothing could break and holding it underwater until it drowned. At the tip of its snout, Sarcosuchus had a distinctive bulbous growth called a bulla, whose function is still debated. Some scientists think it enhanced the animal's sense of smell. Others think it served as a resonating chamber for producing low-frequency sounds. To put Sarcosuchus in perspective, the largest saltwater crocodile ever reliably measured was about 6 meters long and weighed around a ton. Sarcosuchus was twice that length and roughly 8 times the weight. If you've ever watched a documentary about saltwater crocodiles and felt uncomfortable at how large they are, imagine one that could eat that crocodile as a snack. However, Sarcosuchus wasn't a true crocodilian. It belonged to an extinct family called Phalidosauridæ, making it a distant cousin of modern crocs rather than a direct ancestor. It shared a common ancestor with today's crocodilians, but followed a completely different evolutionary path, one that led to sizes that make modern crocodilians look like house pets. Sarcosuchus was also not the last of the giant crocodylomorphs. Millions of years after it went extinct, another lineage produced something nearly as large on the other side of the Atlantic. Purosaurus brasiliensis lived in the river systems of the Amazon basin during the late Miocene, roughly 8 million years ago, which makes it relatively recent in geological terms. This was a genuine caiman, a close relative of the caimans that live in South American rivers today, except it was roughly 10 to 12 meters long and may have weighed 8 metric tons. That's a modern caiman scaled up by a factor of 5. Its skull alone was over 1.5 meters long, with massive caniniform teeth at the front of its jaws that stood roughly 10 centimeters tall, taller than your hand. Bite force modeling for Purosaurus has produced some of the highest numbers ever calculated for any animal, estimates reaching nearly 70,000 newtons, which would make it one of the most devastating biters in the history of life. Period. Purosaurus was the undisputed apex predator of its ecosystem, hunting giant rodents, ground sloths, and other large mammals that came to the Amazon waterways to drink. It lived in a world where the Amazon basin was even wetter and more ecologically productive than it is today, supporting a density of giant crocodylomorphs that would be unthinkable in the modern world. Now, if Sarcosuchus was the biggest, Deinosuchus was the one with a confirmed taste for dinosaurs. Deinosuchus, whose name translates from Greek as terrible crocodile, lived roughly 80 to 73 million years ago during the late Cretaceous in North America. Unlike Sarcosuchus, Deinosuchus was an alligatoroid, meaning it's more closely related to modern alligators than to modern crocodiles. But that family resemblance is about where the similarity ends, because Deinosuchus was an absolute giant. Length estimates for the largest individuals range from 10 to 12 meters, with weights potentially reaching 5 tons or more. Its skull was broad, rounded, and massively built, covered in thick osteoderms, the bony plates that give crocodilian skin its rough, armored texture. It looked like a modern alligator that somebody had scaled up to the size of a bus. The first Deinosuchus remains were actually discovered in the 1850s in North Carolina, though the genus wasn't formally named until 1909. Over the following century, fossils turned up across the eastern and western United States, from Texas and Montana to Georgia and New Jersey, painting a picture of a widespread apex predator that dominated coastal waterways across the entire continent. The most compelling evidence for what Deinosuchus ate comes directly from the bones of its prey. Dinosaur fossils from the late Cretaceous have been found with deep bite marks that match the tooth pattern of Deinosuchus. These aren't random scratches. They're puncture wounds in the bones of hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs that weighed several tons, showing that Deinosuchus was actively attacking and killing large dinosaurs at the water's edge. The hunting strategy was almost certainly the same ambush technique used by modern crocodilians. Lie submerged, motionless, invisible, and wait for something large to come down to the river to drink. Then explode forward with everything you've got. Except the animal doing the exploding was 10 meters long and weighed as much as an African elephant. And it lived for a very long time individually. Studies of Deinosuchus bone microstructure suggest that these animals grew at a rate similar to modern crocodilians, but maintained that growth for up to 50 years, meaning they kept getting bigger for decades. A modern alligator reaches its adult size within 15 to 20 years and then essentially stops growing. Deinosuchus never stopped. The largest individuals weren't just old, they were ancient by animal standards, lifelong predators that had been hunting, growing and accumulating mass for half a century. Every year they survived, they got bigger and more dangerous. By the time a Deinsuchus reached its maximum size, it had probably outlived every other large animal in its ecosystem multiple times over, and there was quite literally nothing left in its environment that could threaten it. Deinosuchus fossils have been found on both sides of the Western Interior Seaway, the shallow sea that split North America in half during the late Cretaceous, and across 10 different American states, from Texas and Montana to Georgia and New Jersey. This wasn't a localized oddity. It was a widespread, continent-spanning apex predator that dominated coastal and estuarine environments across all of North America. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. There's a lot more ahead. Now, those are the giants and the predators. But the Crocodylomorph family tree also produced some creatures so bizarre that calling them crocodiles feels like a practical joke being played on the entire field of taxonomy. Simosuchus clarkii lived on the island of Madagascar about 66 million years ago, right at the end of the Cretaceous. It was a crocodylomorph, a genuine card-carrying member of the crocodile family tree. And it was a vegetarian. Simosuchus was barely 75 centimeters long, about 2.5 feet, roughly the size of a house cat. It had a short, blunt, pug-nosed snout that looked nothing like the elongated jaws of any modern crocodilian, and its teeth were leaf-shaped and multicusped, designed for chewing plant material rather than tearing flesh. Its body was stubby and broad, covered in heavy armored plates that made it look more like an armored turtle without a shell than anything you'd recognize as a crocodile relative. Imagine a house cat with a pug nose, covered head to tail in armored plates, munching on ferns in a Cretaceous forest, while actual predators walked past it without giving it a second glance. That's Simosuchus. Simosuchus had absolutely no interest in hunting anything. It ate plants, kept its head down, and relied on that armor to discourage the actual predators in its neighborhood from making it a meal. A vegetarian crocodile the size of a cat. If someone described that animal to you without telling you what it was, crocodile would be the last word you'd guess. And Simosuchus wasn't the only crocodylomorph that gave up the predator lifestyle entirely. Across the Mesozoic and Cenozoic, multiple lineages independently evolved herbivorous or omnivorous diets, suggesting that the crocodylomorph body plan was so adaptable it could abandon meat-eating altogether and still thrive. At the opposite extreme was Razanandrongobsakalavier, also from Madagascar, but much older, dating to the Middle Jurassic roughly 170 million years ago. This was a massive terrestrial crocodylomorph with a deep, wide skull and serrated teeth that looked more like those of a theropod dinosaur than a crocodile. Razanandrongobi is thought to have been one of the largest predators in its ecosystem, filling the top carnivore role of Madagascar long before large dinosaurs dominated the island. Its teeth were so unusual that when fragmentary remains were first described, scientists weren't even sure it was a crocodylomorph at all. It took decades and additional fossil material before its identity was confirmed. Then there was Armadillosuchus, which lived roughly 90 million years ago in the Bauru Basin of Brazil. Its name means armadillo crocodile, and the resemblance is beyond coincidence. Armadillosuchus had a crocodile-like head and tail, but its body was covered in thick, banded armor plates arranged in articulating segments that are nearly identical to the structure of a modern armadillo's shell. It even had separate armor sections for the head and the body, just like an armadillo does today. This creature lived far from water, in dry, arid environments that would be the last place on Earth you'd expect to find a crocodile relative, and it likely dug burrows in the ground for shelter, the same survival strategy that armadillos use today. A burrowing, armor-plated, land-dwelling crocodylomorph that lived in a desert and dug holes for a living. This is convergent evolution at its most creative. Two completely unrelated animals separated by 90 million years arriving at almost the exact same body plan in response to the same environmental challenges. And then there's Mourasuchus, which lived in South America during the Miocene roughly 23 to 5 million years ago. Mourasuchus was massive, up to 12 meters long, making it one of the largest crocodylomorphs of its era. But its skull was unlike any crocodilian before or since. Its mouth was enormously wide, well over 1 meter across in some species, flat and duck-billed, with relatively tiny peg-like teeth that were completely inadequate for gripping or killing large prey. The jaw muscles were weak compared to other crocodylomorphs of similar size, and the entire skull structure suggests an animal that wasn't designed for biting at all. Scientists believe Mourasuchus was a filter feeder. It would open its massive jaws underwater and strain small fish and invertebrates from the water column, functioning more like a biological fishing net or a pelican's pouch than a predator. Some researchers have compared it to a baleen whale, sieving tiny organisms from the water with its broad, flat mouth, a 12-meter crocodile relative that fed like a whale. That sentence shouldn't make any sense, and yet the fossils sitting in South American museums prove it happened. And Mourasuchus wasn't even the only giant crocodylomorph in its ecosystem. The rivers and wetlands of Miocene South America were home to an almost unbelievable density of large crocodylomorphs, including Purosaurus, the giant gharial Kaprosuchus, and several other caiman species, all living alongside each other. Some estimates suggest that there were more species of large crocodylomorph in the Miocene Amazon than there are in any comparable tropical river system today. The wetlands were warm, productive, and packed with food, and the crocodylomorphs filled every available niche. Purosaurus was the apex predator. Mourasuchus was the filter feeder. Kaprosuchus was the fish specialist, with a long, narrow snout designed for snatching individual fish the way a modern gharial does. Others were generalist ambush predators, occupying the same role that modern caimans fill today. It was a crocodylomorph paradise, a world where the dominant vertebrates in the river system weren't fish or mammals, but multiple species of giant reptiles, each one doing something different, all sharing the same waterways. This is what the Crocodylomorph family tree actually looks like when you pull the camera back far enough. Bipedal land predators with blade-like teeth that dominated North America before dinosaurs. Open ocean swimmers with dolphin-smooth skin and flippers that never touched dry land in their entire lives. Galloping tusked hunters that charged prey on the African plains like armored warthogs. 40-foot river monsters that dragged dinosaurs underwater. Tiny armored vegetarians the size of house cats. Desert burrowers that built underground shelters in armadillo shells. And enormous filter feeders with duckbills that sieved the Amazon. The semi-aquatic ambush predator we call a crocodile is just one strategy out of dozens that this group has tried over the past 230 million years, and it's the only one still operating, which raises the obvious question. Why that one? Why did the generalists survive when all the specialists didn't? The answer, like most answers in paleontology, is mass extinctions, and the pattern is remarkably consistent once you see it. Every time the planet went through a major extinction event, the crocodylomorph species that were highly specialized for one particular lifestyle were the first to disappear, while the flexible generalists scraped through. The end Triassic extinction, roughly 201 million years ago, wiped out the large bipedal land predators like Carnifex and opened the door for dinosaurs. The ocean crocodiles thrived through the Jurassic, but couldn't survive the marine disruptions at the end of the Cretaceous. Their entire body plan was built for life at sea, and when the seas turned toxic and the food chains collapsed, they had nowhere else to go. On land, later terrestrial specialists like Kaprosuchus and Mourasuchus couldn't compete with mammalian carnivores once the end. Cretaceous extinction removed the dinosaurs and mammals radiated explosively into every available predator niche. Mammals turned out to be faster runners, better endurance hunters, and more adaptable to cooling climates than land-dwelling crocodylomorphs, and within a few million years, the mammalian carnivores had locked down every major terrestrial predator role on the planet. The giant filter feeders like Mourasuchus disappeared when the vast South American wetland ecosystems they depended on contracted and dried up during climate shifts of the late Miocene and Pliocene. And the true giants like Sarcosuchus, Deinosuchus, and Purosaurus were simply too large and too energy-dependent for the worlds that came after their respective extinction events. Being 40 feet long is a spectacular survival strategy until the river system you depend on shrinks by half. However, the semi-aquatic ambush predator, the one that could live in fresh water or salt water, eat fish or mammals or birds or turtles or whatever wandered too close to the water's edge, tolerate a wide range of temperatures, and survive extraordinarily long periods without food, that body plan proved more durable than every other approach the family ever tried. It wasn't the flashiest strategy. It wasn't the most specialized. But it was the most flexible, and flexibility is what survival demands when the world periodically decides to reset everything. A crocodile can go months without eating. It can regulate its body temperature by moving between water and land. It can live in brackish estuaries, freshwater rivers, or coastal saltwater. It breeds successfully in a huge range of conditions, and it sits at the top of the food chain in almost every aquatic environment it occupies. That combination of low metabolic cost, dietary flexibility, and environmental tolerance is the reason crocodilians have survived every catastrophe the planet has thrown at vertebrates for over 100 million years straight. Modern crocodilians aren't frozen in time. They're not relics that somehow escaped evolution. They're the last survivors of an incredibly diverse lineage, carrying forward the one strategy that proved adaptable enough to outlast 230 million years of planetary chaos. Every living crocodile, alligator, caiman, and gharial is the descendant of the boring ones, the ones that didn't specialize, the ones that played it safe while their more spectacular relatives ran on two legs and swam with flippers and ate plants and filtered plankton and grew to the size of school buses. The specialists were more interesting. The generalists are still alive. And they're not just surviving, they're thriving. There are 27 species of crocodilian alive today, spread across every tropical and subtropical region on the planet, from the rivers of the Amazon to the estuaries of Southeast Asia to the swamps of the American South. They've outlasted the dinosaurs, the ice ages, the rise and fall of mammalian dynasties, and the arrival of humans. The semi-aquatic ambush predator isn't glamorous, but 230 million years of unbroken success is its own kind of brilliance. The next time you see a crocodile in a documentary, lying motionless in a muddy river with just its eyes and nostrils above the surface, remember what its relatives used to be. Some of them sprinted across open ground on two legs with blade-like teeth. Before dinosaurs even existed, some of them swam through the open Jurassic Ocean with flippers and never touched land in their entire lives. Some of them had tusks and rammed prey like armored warthogs in the African sun. Some of them ate nothing but plants, and some of them were large enough to drag a full-grown dinosaur underwater and hold it there until it stopped moving. The modern crocodile isn't a living fossil. It's the last one standing. And after 230 million years of outlasting everything the planet could throw at it, from asteroid impacts to ice ages to the rise and fall of the dinosaurs themselves, that's not a sign of stagnation. That's a survival record that almost nothing else on Earth can match. If this blew your mind, check out the video on screen. It covers another chapter of prehistoric life that'll change how you think about the animals that came before us. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.